Beautiful. So, hi, everybody. We are live today with another technology webinar with EKC. And today we have the ProStar and the PointMan team. You guys can explain a little bit more about that here with us today to share more about underground utilities and what it means to have digital assets and make use of that in the built environment. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to the team to give some intros. So let's first start off with Nick.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to meet you all virtually. Nick Clawson. I help lead the business development team here at PointMan. My partners in crime here, Lilly and Peter. We take a lot of these calls. We're very happy to be involved with EKC and the good work she's doing. Erin, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for
But
being
yeah,
here.
yeah, of course. A little bit about my background. Been here for a little bit over a year at the PointMan ProStar team. Have seen it grow quite a bit, and we're super excited for any questions. Please keep it an open forum. We've all been in school and don't plan on treating it like a lecture. So, stop us, question us, all the good stuff. But thank you for the introduction, Erin. I'll pitch it over to Lilly, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. My name's Lilly Kolisch. I'm the product specialist here at PointMan. I've been with the company about 2.5 years now and have had the opportunity to work kind of across the board from the development team on customer assurance and quality assurance, just making sure the app is tested and ready to go directly into the user's hands, to now having the great opportunity to speak with clients and do more things like this.
All right. Thanks, Lilly. And last but certainly not least, Peter.
Good morning or good afternoon, as the case may be, to everybody on the webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Peter Srajer. I am the Chief Engineer here at ProStar. My role for the last 4 years has been to kind of drive some of the innovation concepts and ideas and to be able to answer any technical questions or engineering questions. My background is 20 years in the engineering and surveying sector, so I'm here to answer those questions. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. So for some of our audience who may not be super familiar with utilities and kind of what goes into mapping that, could somebody just give a really basic overview of like why we need to even do this in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So here, kind of in the construction world, we're facing a bit of an issue amongst our projects of every time we get out onto green and brownfield projects, we're having an issue with understanding where our buried infrastructure is. From the second you step foot on the site, you're having to bring in a locate team to perform your locates, hydrovac to perform your potholes. And then, even throughout the project, regardless of the fact that you have the plans, you have the paint on the ground, there's still hundreds of line strikes that occur on every single project. I think the statistic is there's a line strike every working day of every working year. I'm sorry, every working hour of every working day.
Oh my gosh, that's really
equates
not
to,
great.
billions of dollars in infrastructure damage. And not only that, but it's costing money, it's delaying project times, and ultimately, if you're hitting a high pressure gas line, you're risking the lives of your crew, right? So we're understanding that we need accurate maps that you can stake to in the field, that have the accuracy based off of survey grade data. And that's where PointMan kind of comes in, and we're an all-around field to finish software, from data collection to asset management to system of record, that you can actually pull up your utilities on your mobile phone from an app, be able to click on what's in your area and stake to it to understand what's around you.
So I want to thanks, Lilly. That's a really good overview. I want to kind of get into, or maybe I'll just summarize it myself, right? Like, so, and this is putting it in very simple terms. So you need to dig for something on your project, and the risk there is that you're hitting something and something bad happens, right? So we're trying to prevent that. Peter, do you want to?
Yeah, that's, like Lilly said, and like you're kind of doing yourself, it is an understanding of what's below your feet. And not just that, it's understanding of, where it is more important than in this general area. If you don't have a reasonable accuracy, then it's really more of a hindrance than a gain. If somebody tells you, yeah, somewhere in this block there's a gas line, well, that's going to make you very worried that you're going to hit it. If you have an accurate understanding of where this is, well, then that's much better than, more information is always better than less.
Yeah, data is kind of, I guess, number one in the game. So with that being said, it seems like anything that's under the ground, and like I never think about what I'm walking on, when I'm just out and about, but it seems like there's a lot of risk involved. It's kind of a liability. It's, kind of scary, right? It's the unknown. And I'm curious to get the group's take. So, do you see like these underground items as liabilities, or how can a project team, for example, de-risk that and turn it into something that's a positive?
Yeah, it's 100% a liability because, the second you, as a superintendent, send your crew out to the field
Yeah.
to start digging, you're responsible for their safety. And unfortunately, the areas that you're digging in are not safe environments. Not only like OSHA provides all sorts of rules for, how to keep your crew safe, but what happens when you have no idea as to, what utilities are in the area, electrical, gas, water, etc. If you're striking one of those, there's almost a guaranteed safety risk for your entire crew.
Yep, and just to piggyback off of that, there are solutions as far as how we can avoid this going forward. It's really hard to retroactively go and find where a lot of these utilities are. There's great companies and great partners of ours that do exactly that. But part of our initiative at PointMan, from a company's perspective, is to be able to turn what used to be an unknown liability, partner with other similar construction technologies that are able to go locate and document where these facilities are, and bring what used to be a liability for a company and turn it into an asset. When you don't know where it is, when you're in the field and you don't have any records, when you can't share that information with either stakeholders, or more importantly, what would devolve down to the citizen population being the affected people of it, of course it's a liability. But with solutions and good partners and good information platforms like this one, we're able to get out the word that, hey, there is a solution to making some of those liabilities turn into what should be assets for companies.
Yeah, so it's really bringing transparency to the unknown. Yeah.
Validation, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of part of the challenge is we can all go to the public municipality's website and find where we think stuff is. There is our GIS logins, every city has one. And
Oh yeah,
part of what we're trying to bring to the table, as mentioned earlier, is the validation and the data that can allow an engineer or a surveyor or a professional to put their signature and say, hey, this is exactly where it is, based on the information provided from, again, partners such as industry partners that locate the facilities, and software partners like ourselves. And then the most important part is, again, getting out the word, which is why we're here working with EKC today.
Yeah, so I love that you mentioned data, and I want to unpack that a little bit more. So we know in construction, like data is oftentimes really siloed. It's hard to get a hold of or kind of get a good collaboration on that data. So I'm curious to know, especially with like things that are literally buried, how do you get data on that and then share that, collaborate on it, all the good stuff that, data transparency helps do?
Probably answer a little bit on that before I hand it
Yeah.
off. In most cases, the technology to, either excavate to that, pipe, or get it when it's as built, that's the ideal method. In that case there, we can actually put hands-on or survey instruments on the actual pipe or feature. And that way we have an understanding that we actually have that actual feature and the accuracy is as expected. In other ways, I mean, if it's buried, you're not going to want to unbury the whole thing or the whole line. So you go through manholes, figure that out. But then again, you only have accurate data on that single point. We have other methods, and we have partners with us in the electromagnetic locating field that use those instruments basically to get, the most probable location of all the facilities in the area, or you use GPR systems. There's lots of technology that does that, but then we have to understand, okay, that's not quite the same thing. If you can actually lay hands on it, it's a quality level A. You actually have to understand it with some caveats on the accuracy. If you can't lay your hands on it, then it's B, C, or D, in fact. So as long as we have an understanding of that, as an engineer, liability is one of the forefronts of my concerns. If I sign off on something and it's my mistake, then not only am I liable, then I also have some professional issues. And that happens to everybody in the professional field. So it's not just an understanding of how we get, that we have the data, it's an understanding of how we got this data and how accurate we can expect this data to be. And all that has to be backed up by numbers.
Right.
If you don't have anything to back you up, then you don't have anything.
So I'm curious to know too, like, what's the life cycle of the data? So you collect, information on where your utilities are, but like then what happens to it, or what are best practices? Like, does it just stay stored in a system somewhere? How do we kind of democratize it, if you will?
Yeah, up until recently, let's be honest, most data is siloed. The utility company that put it in, that paid for it, has the data. Whether they release it or not is subject to various regulatory environments. A lot of cases, no, it's basically on some internal server or it's on somebody's hard drive. Valuable information, but we are losing the value of it if you can't disseminate it to the people who really need it. The person in the office may have this information somewhere on their server. Great. An Excel file with a bunch of coordinates on it is of little use to somebody in the field.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
it's just going to get buried on that
they look at it
Excel
going,
on someone's computer. Yeah.
Bunch of coordinates, or an idea of where things are. I mean, if you tell them, oh, it's 2 feet off the the toe of the curb, that's a horrible thing to tell somebody, because you're telling them something. Yes, it's valid, but that doesn't help. You need to visualize these things, and they need to be disseminated to the field operations. Nick, Lilly?
Yeah, to piggyback on that, it's as we were kind of walking down that linear path of, okay, how do you find this data? Where do you store this data? What happens to it? And then it's, how do you use this data, right? And that part of the equation was and is still largely missing from even our clients and people in the industry. So what we've aimed to do is, like you mentioned, Erin, create a cloud-based centralized system that gives the contractors access, that gives the owners access, that gives any involved stakeholder in the life cycle of a project real-time access to the information. And instead of having to buy highly specialized equipment to be able to use this data, it's all on the mobile phone. Mobile phone, mobile tablets. It's something that I'll admit it. I'm 26, just so everyone knows. I've been using the phone my whole life, right? I can teach this, and I have no qualms towards my father, but he can pick it up and I can teach it to my dad tomorrow. So it's centralizing the information somewhere that's easy to use, easy to visualize, and C, being able to share it, and C, being able to use it in an easy to use way. So a lot of what we're doing is just bringing the 21st century to the utility world.
I like that analogy. It's like, yeah, we all have one of these here in our pockets, and it's pretty much a standard thing these days. Like, oh yeah, let me just whip out my device that's with me almost at all times, and be able to do stuff on it. And if we can connect the construction side and the doing stuff on our tablets together, we unlock a next level of like capabilities.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then a step farther to that is how it translates to the working world and the world that wants to get involved in surveying, construction, and things of the like. It takes a highly specialized, very informed individual to be on the surveyor engineer side. And that kind of specialization we're trying to bring to the hands of an everyday human that can go find these great hardware solutions to capture survey grade data, download an application from their phone or their tablet to be able to use this information. And now we're allowing for, someone that maybe would have to go to a 4-year or a 6-year degree before, really putting that power in their hands.
Yeah.
With the partnerships of the hardware that we do partner with again, great information platforms like this one. That's I guess more to the democratization of kind of the industry and what we're aiming to do.
Yeah, and I wanted to pick on one thing how you framed it. So with the data that you're getting, it's, step 1, you find it, step 2, you store it, and step 3, you use it, right? But historically, I think in the industry, we've been really good about the finding and the storing piece, but not necessarily like the using and collaborating in the field piece.
Exactly.
So bringing it that extra mile, and exactly what you just said, putting that data in the field user's hands immediately just finishes that whole cycle. So we're
Right.
graduating from the just storing the data to now like being empowered with it. So yeah.
Absolutely. So
It's
the
something that's
age-old
easily
question of,
accessible.
go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lily. Yeah.
I was gonna say answering that's easily accessible, because oftentimes, as you mentioned, like we're doing a decent job with the data collection, we're doing a decent job of the storage, but it goes into an archaic, unfortunately, storage system that sits in the back of an office somewhere that it's hard to find, it's hard to bring out into the field, and no one wants to deal with the process of using it. And so unfortunately, they're more willing to accept that risk and liability than have to sift through the data that they do currently have. And so to Nick's point, being able to put it in a format that's accessible right away, that's accessible with ease, that takes, a few clicks of a button rather than, hours of manual labor to find these data sets, is really kind of a game changer.
Yeah, 100%. So, another follow-up question on this topic. So we have a bunch of data, we're able to use it, but, and I posted about this recently, but, garbage in equals garbage out. So we need to know that our data is correct, accurate, that we can trust what it's telling us, right? So if something says, oh, dig, 2 feet to the left of this curve and it's X, dimension down, or whatever the case may be, how are we able to trust that? So I'd love to hear more on that.
Sure, I can start on that if you don't mind. Most locating devices, GNSS, total stations, whatever else, have a inherent measure of accuracy, right? They'll tell you, you can look at your DOPS, you can look at your accuracy measures, your error ellipses and all that. And that is exactly how we validate any data that we come in. We store it, we look at it, and we make that available to the expert in the office who can look at that and say, yeah, I'm willing to accept that. This shouldn't be up to the person in the field to accept. Absolutely not. That's not their role. They're not responsible for it. It is the engineer or the surveyor who looks at the data initially and says, yeah, okay, based on these metrics that the system should be bringing up to him to see, this is a level of accuracy. If you don't have that level of confidence, then you really shouldn't be pushing this out to the field operator, because the risk is on them, not you. There's a caveat there. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I mean, if you look at the timeline of that data, from the time it's collected in the field to the time it gets signed off by the engineer, you're looking at, at minimum days, but most likely you're looking at weeks to months of when those data sets are finally looked at. And unfortunately, when the data is not qualifiable, now you're having to call those field crews up again and say, hey, you need to go back to the field to recollect this. Or you're going through the organization of the data saying, do these photos apply to these data sets? Do these sketches apply to these data sets? And you're having to sift through that. And, the longer the time goes by, the less and less accurate it becomes, because, it's being passed down. So Now being able to have your engineers see it come through in live time, to be able to qualify it in live time before the crew even leaves the field is kind of the next step that we're all trying to move toward.
Yeah, that is really exciting. I think anything where you're like, oh, real-time information, validation, I immediately am like, oh, that's super exciting. I want to see those types of applications because time is like so precious in construction. I feel like anything that helps gain that efficiency helps us, ultimately also be safer, have better work product, and all the good stuff that comes with it. So, yeah. So I do want to also remind people who are tuning in to this live, feel free to drop any questions or comments into the chat. So I am monitoring it and I can definitely address anything that you have to ask the team here. So it's a great opportunity to engage. So just a reminder to use that comment box or the chat box. And then moving on to another topic. So current challenges. So we've talked about like how risky it is. You dig into something, a pipe burst, you hit an electrical wire or whatever the case may be. But like what other challenges beyond just the initial risk are there with locating assets that are underground today?
In a lot of cases, Erin, the issue is when this utility was installed, they probably have fairly accurate records of where it was installed. The gas company put it in, I'm sure they did an as-built on it, and it's quite accurate and quite valuable. Unfortunately, the case is with, well, almost any utility, is that data is siloed. If you ask them for where it is, they'll send out a locate crew to mark it for you. And that's valuable because you can see the marks on the ground and know where things are. But on a large construction project, that doesn't help because those marks are gone within hours after some big piece of iron runs it over. So what we need to do is have a more of a all-encompassing data set and a more permanent data set. So that, the underground features aren't going to move anywhere once you hit them, of course.
Hopefully
so why
not.
do we not have, a more permanent accessible record for them? So it's an issue of siloing at this point in time. Security issues aside, I can understand that, but the idea that we have all the full information is much more valuable to the construction site.
Yeah.
Let's do Lilly then Nick.
No, and I'll give you an example of something similar. So I was on site yesterday taking a look at a project. That you have a certain window of time when you're working in DOT right-of-ways in order to complete your project. Because if you're shutting the road down, obviously they want the people of the city to be able to get through. And so they say, hey, for this block of time, let's say 5 weeks, you can shut the roads down or you can section off the roads to be able to perform your hydrovacking. So you can actually see the utilities, because we understand that the data siloed. We understand that you need to shut it down and actually tear the road up to see, where these utilities are at. But now we have the issue of when you are collecting that brownfield data of actually, putting eyes on the utility, it's not being documented at all. You have the original plans.
Is that specific to brownfields?
It depends on who you're working with. Some companies are better than documentation than others. But oftentimes it's not being written down, and when it is, it's being written down by someone who may not understand the readings that they're taking.
Sure.
And so to conform with the project timeline, it gets covered up right away. And with the example I was working with yesterday, they're trying to install a water main and had to do some exploratory to be able to move the water main out of the way of a gas line. And since that data was all covered up after the vac truck came in, they're going to have to do it all over again, because now the water main can't go in the original place. And so they're going to have to uncover what they just hydrovaced because nothing was written down.
Wow.
Which means contact the DOT again and ask for an extended period of time. So this all, sums up the delays of projects. The reason we see, those traffic cones in the road for most of the year.
Oh, that example hurts. I think there's definitely a lot of data out there on this, but rework is far up there on the list of like the main reasons why projects are delayed or they just completely overrun their costs. So yeah, preventing that rework is a huge component or a huge challenge that we're facing in the industry. And like that goes everywhere, right? So yeah. And then Nick, I think you had another comment as well.
Yeah, it's kind of just a piggyback on both of what they said, but as far as locating the utility and the challenges surrounding that, like Peter mentioned, we've done a pretty good job. There are good practices for how to find it, especially if you can put your eyes on it and they, an engineer or surveyor can assign a certain quality level. But again, yeah, I think you kind of nailed it, Peter. A lot of security reasons limit. And I would say the biggest challenge is sharing that information from a security perspective. There's obvious reasons why critical infrastructure needs to be secure. However, what is less secure is not knowing what's going on underneath the ground when people are doing daily work, daily construction, and it has direct effects on not only the workers in the field, but again, these are what power our homes. It's what gives us showers. It does have a residual effect on the citizen population as well. So again, it's the shareability and getting the owners and the operators and the contractor to communicate with each other. And again, I do think that lies with the security challenge, but it's all about sharing the information. Just once again, that's what it comes down to.
So we do have a question here. Thanks, Christopher, for dropping this into the comments. So what are some steps that smaller organizations can take to reliably reference the location of existing buried assets in the field without having to rely on a locating crew every time?
That's a bit of a loaded question, but fair question. If you have that data existing when it was as built, then you can rely on that. It was put in and, with the caveat, of course, that the proper accuracy measure and field procedures were used, you have this data. Are you willing to take the liability of not using a locate crew? That's going to depend, well, on where it is. If it's in a green field, well, fair enough, understandable. And you are confident that there's no utilities in the area, which makes sense. But professionally, as a liability, I'm not sure you can, unless you're willing to, hydrovac or excavate and get accurate measures, relying on existing records. If something goes wrong, you're now liable. And this is, tens of thousands to millions of dollars worth of damage, possibly. Are you willing to risk that over a field crew?
It's really like a risk evaluation decision there.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that question? Either Nick or Lilly? Peter covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
Peter covered it well, and without trying to shamelessly plug ourselves, but as mentioned, the best practices of hydrovacing and or potholing, test holing, whatever you want to call it, that's one way to collect existing infrastructure and be able to validate the data for an engineer or surveyor with applications like ourselves or others in the market that can collect, store, and then visualize exactly where that test hole information was. So that's your solution to existing as far as what I understand today.
And I think the only other factor to it is visualization of the accuracy. I mean, I think Peter covered it really, really well, but being able to, click on the utility lines and visualize the actual accuracy it was collected with is huge. You're not going off of like a drawing on a map for reference. You're going off of a drawing digital on a map that was collected, not drawn in with hopefully precision and accuracy. But you can actually now pull up that metadata and see the accuracy of the data collection. So even if it wasn't performed accurately, you can see, hey, within 8 feet of this is where my utility is going to be. Back to the conversation of, some data is better than nothing, because at least now you know what you're getting into.
Some data is better than nothing. Yeah. knowing a little bit is better than being completely in the dark. Yeah.
Yes, in this case, that's kind of the adage of the construction industry because, you know, at least, okay, plus or minus 2 meters, sorry, Canadian here, that's fine. So go 3 meters away if you're willing to take that. So there is, you know, if I can understand, you know, the cost of a locator and if it's been done, you know, 5 times in the last 6 months, as long as that data has been collected properly, stored properly, and you have access to it and understand it, then that's usually quite valid. I mean, just because you don't want to send out a locate crew, that's fine. If there was one sent out last month and nothing has occurred in that intervening time period, you know, and you have that data, great, there you go. There's no sense in repeating or, you know, reinventing the wheel in this case.
Right. So thanks for all that feedback, and thanks, Christopher, for asking the questions. So again, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in. I'll pick them up. I'm monitoring the chat. And then I do want to expand on something that you mentioned a little bit earlier, Nick, is that these utilities, obviously they're servicing people at the end of the day. So there's an effect on our daily lives, which, you know, we don't always, I know I don't always connect it back to the things that are beneath the ground,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'll give my most common example, and I'm sure there are dozens, but we speak to a lot of municipalities who obviously have a vested interest in documenting and sharing the locations of critical infrastructure. And one of the challenges, you know, especially with cities, which many of ours probably are, that are growing in population, you know, growing in infrastructure.
Yeah.
You know, when there is a strike, whether it be a contractor or the city itself, will say there's a water main that's been hit or a water line that's been hit. If you don't know which valve is responsible for the water flow to that line, you are now going to every single valve that you can until you find the right one, which means if it's valve X and you're starting at valve A, well, valve A through X are connected to businesses, they're connected to schools, they're connected to hospitals, they're connected to homes. And when you turn those off to figure out, hey, where's this problem coming from, you're directly affecting people, business, yourself, the timeline of it. So my most common example would be with the cities and municipalities of the world. Water lines are everywhere. I know there's a ton of infrastructure, but that's, you know, that's probably the biggest one I've seen with the direct impact to people on quite literally a daily basis. I just watched a news story of it here in Austin, Texas yesterday, KXAN, and you know, can't make that up. So
Oh boy. Yeah.
anyone else? I'm sure there are more examples of it.
Peter or Lily?
Well, you know, if you look at the data that you're going to be getting in addition to, you know, like Nick says, locations of valves and everything else like that, properly documented, you could also have maintenance records in there. So you can have an understanding of, okay, this thing has been in the ground for 20 years and it has these conditions attached to it. Maybe we need to look at replacing that. So you can, instead of having a catastrophic failure, we live in Calgary right now, and those of you in the utility industry know we've had a bit of an issue with one of our main feeders, not due to a strike, but due to basically failure of the pipe itself. So maintenance records on those kind of things would have been ideal to understand, okay, we need to look at this before it fails and before we spend a lot more money fixing in a hurry rather than maintaining. So there's a lot of data in addition to spatial data to say, okay, you know what? Let's take a look at this, you know, this year rather than wait for it to fail. But, you know, the issue there, of course, is who's willing to spend the money for maintenance when they really don't have to. It doesn't seem as amazing and sexy to maintain something than it does to build something. So,
and also to bring it full circle, if we're talking about direct effects to, you know, the citizen population, I think we're all well aware of the amount of infrastructure money, at least stateside, that's come down, and that doesn't come from the ether of the air. Everyone here on the call, Peter, I know you're in Canada, but you know, we all have a vested interest, not only from a safety perception, but from a dollar cost example as well. I mean, the we're paying for it, guys. Whether or not
Yeah.
we realize it at the end of the day, we are, as a population, we're paying for it. So that's, one of the direct effects as well.
Yeah, I almost never really think about it too in my day to day, right? It's kind of the stuff that we just take for granted that works all the time. And truth be told, it doesn't always work all the time. And
Well, yeah.
to your point, Peter, like the maintenance part is super important to kind of continue getting the level of service that we need just to function in our daily lives. And when you think about it that way, it's like, oh yeah, definitely maintaining this, keeping, quality standards up, making sure things are easily accessible or searchable. It just gives you the bigger picture of like, yeah, this is an underlying function of society, really, keeping us going day to day. So
I think you have it right there. It's
Yeah.
unfortunately the out of sight, out of mind concept.
Yep.
And oftentimes it really does take some form of a disaster in order for
Yeah.
it to, be the forefront of people's minds. Hitting a gas line, hitting some of these utilities, or as Peter mentioned, like the inspection. Those should be being done every 10 years or so. But when it takes, as to Nick's point, days to find the right valves, to turn the right water sets off, and be able to walk through those lines to do the inspections, it's no longer feasible. And so it takes some form of a disaster for people to start recognizing the issue.
Yeah, I think human nature tends to be more reactive than proactive for sure. So yeah, that was a great insight, Lily. Let's see. So I want to shift gears a little bit, and at the risk of being repetitive, I want to bring up artificial intelligence and machine learning and all the other buzzwords in the AI space that have been going around. So I'm really curious to know, like, with digitization of, what's beneath our feet, how does artificial intelligence play into that? Like, what does the future of, underground utilities look like with AI?
I probably start off on that. The interesting thing is, like you said, these are buzzwords,
Yeah.
but the issue with artificial intelligence, machine learning, is you still have to have correct information to begin with. I mean, AI, well, let's go back. Machine learning is not smart enough to predict that, where this utility is or where this strike's going to be with any level of accuracy. The big buzzwords you see around are the large language models, the chat GPTs, and things like that. Okay. I sent an instruction into, Mistral Instruct, which is one of the better ones for technical questions. Say, where are the underground utilities near a landmark near me? The reply I get back from them: the location of underground utilities such as gas and water lines near this landmark is not publicly available. None. I mean, that is correct, but not very useful.
Right.
It's the big issue. It goes on about, oh, these are typically buried deep and protected by safety measures to prevent accidents and, damage. I'm going, well, yeah, that doesn't happen when an excavator hits it. Safety measures be gone at that point in time. The only recommendation that makes any sense to it says, I would recommend contacting a local utility company for more information. And that's, people are expecting artificial intelligence and machine learning to give them answers. Can only give you the right answer if you have the right information.
100%.
When we are, we are looking more deeply into the machine learning end of things at ProStar, and we're going towards that effort, but we see it more as a tool to disseminate this information.
Right.
And to basically say, okay, based on our estimation of the accuracy, the relevancy of the data, this is the answer we can give you. It's a great conglomerator of information, but it is a very poor predictor of information in the utility sector. It can, you can use it for prediction for maintenance and failure and stuff like that, but it can't help the person right now in the field say, what's below my feet? And am I safe standing here or excavating? So unless you have that information within you, yeah, it is a growing field, and as more and more information comes into it, and more information becomes less siloed. I mean, that's again the same problem.
Right.
The utility company is not releasing this data, so the machine learning doesn't understand it.
Yeah. It's like from my rudimentary understanding of AI, and I know there's a ton of ways to apply it, but it has it in the name. It needs to learn, which means it needs to learn from a proper data set. And that's again where we're spearheading that that application. Like you mentioned, Erin, it's garbage in, garbage out. I think that's a great phrase to use. And that's where we're starting, is bringing validation to the table, allowing for people that are great in the AI world, extremely creative and innovative, to then drive models once we have allowed for a model to learn enough information. And this is a massive overtaking, because this is a problem all over the world, right?
Huge. Yeah, it's huge. So we did get another question from Daniel in the chat. So thanks for sending this one in. And the question is, are there any advantages with performing municipality contracted work with regards to accessing as-built or historical data compared to a general contractor operating directly for the private property owner?
Well, yes, there is, because if you're working for a municipal, and as I'm being generalized on this, a lot of municipalities, contract out that work anyway, and it's really a good idea. They have access to their records, and they probably have most large cities have a fairly extensive data set of GIS data, geospatial data, CAD data. And if they've managed to digitize that properly, then it's extremely valuable. But, the issue there is that all of them? Municipality may have, of course, put the water lines in, possibly electrical and then sewer lines and stuff like that. But the gas company may have put something else in there, right? So do they have all the data? That's the question you must ask. And how accurate is all the data? If you're only have half, well, valuable, sure, because don't dig there. But if that other fiber optic line by Verizon is 2 feet off and you hit it, you're going to be hearing from them. And then it's not going to be you can't blame the city for not having the data, because they told you this is the data we do have.
Yeah, so probably coming prepared with those questions ahead of time when you go to do some of this work helps inform a little bit more about, oh, well, maybe I need to do a little bit more research or digging, pun intended, to do a little bit more digging to make sure you're talking to the right people to get as much info as you can.
Exactly.
Great. So there is one additional comment here, I think, tying back to what we were saying about artificial intelligence. So they're mentioning, check out Aggozino, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who are using or pushing the envelope using AI to help detect buried assets by assisting the analysis of multi-sensor devices. So yeah.
Absolutely correct. I mean,
a lot of great use cases.
Garbage in, garbage out. But if you have proper data, machine learning is wonderful, because it'll conglomerate that and give you a synopsis. Okay, this is what we think is here. How far are you willing to trust that is also has to be put in there to say, this is the confidence we have in that data. You have data that you brought in that showed 50 years ago when we put this in. Well, that should be stated up front. This accuracy is less than something we did yesterday. We have less confidence in that. And that's where machine learning does a great job. It'll put all those factors together, hopefully, and say, okay, this is what we're looking at. So it gives you information.
100%. So this is now like the perfect time. We're in the last 15 minutes or so of the discussion. So if anybody has any questions or comments, now is the perfect time to ask or get that in before we end the session for today. So just a reminder to use that comment or chat box to do so if you like. And then I want to ask the group as well, like, what is the future of utility mapping? So, there there's IoT. I've seen some really interesting use cases with like taking utility data and putting it into augmented reality, for example. What is the future like?
That's a great question. And I think you hit on it very well there. The future of utilities is getting the data in, having an understanding of how good and accurate it is, and then being able to present that, whether it's through augmented reality, the virtual reality headsets, or, just being able to get it out to people. Like we talked about earlier
Mhm.
here,
To the field. Yep.
it has to go to the people that need that information. And humans being generally a visual species, we like to see things. If I give
Yes.
you a list of coordinates, I'm going to get a blank stare back in response, and justifiably so. If I show you a live map showing where you are and where the utility lines are, whether it's just on your iPad or phone or in virtual reality, that's what you want to see. That gives you a level of confidence and makes you feel, let's be honest, safer in the field if you can say, okay, yeah, that line's
Right.
4 feet that way. Great, I'm okay. So it's getting that proper data set information into a proper format so the field users can understand it.
Yeah, that human-centric
Yeah.
approach to building and operating, maintaining.
Yeah. And how you get this information, whether it's through machine learning or field operations or whatever else, that's just the first part. You got to put it together and have a level of confidence in that data to be able to visualize it.
And Peter, if you could speak to this as well, I believe there's a new standard coming around as far as how to satisfy certain quality levels of data and how to capture that information. And I think from my remedial understanding of it, being able to put your eyes on it, capture the exact depth is definitely a part of it. And I see that going forward as where utilities are headed. Could you maybe elaborate on some of those standards?
Absolutely correct. I mean, ASCE 3822 standards, they are standards for how to collect the accuracy levels that you're looking for. The corollary to that is ASCE 7822. I stand to be corrected on the 78, which describes how to visualize them, what they should be looking for and looking at. So, that I think is, a critical piece that we often overlook is that we need to standardize what we show. If you're thinking, a gas line, ASC standards is supposed to be a yellow color. That's what you want to be able to show and have everybody understand. A gas line is yellow, electrical line is red. I know a lot of people say, oh, I'd rather have photorealistic renderings in my AI, or sorry, in my augmented reality. Yeah, I hate that because they all look brown to me. Underground pipe looks brown. It
True.
doesn't tell me anything about it. If it's a minor little conduit, with nothing in it, well, I don't care too much about scratching that. If it's a 2-inch high pressure gas line, well, yeah, I want that to stand out. So there are those standards there. I encourage anybody to go to the ASCE website and you can, I believe it's purchase those standards and walk through them and see what they mean. Because, the goal is to be able to have everybody understand the same thing in the field. And these are great standards for that.
Yeah, it's so I mean, I wish I didn't continue to be surprised about this, but the lack of standardization, I think, plagues the industry in so many different areas. So I completely agree, Peter, like having just one agreed upon way of interpreting and visualizing the data when it comes to certain things can definitely help us speak the same language, and then translate that back to, somebody who may not be an engineer, but needs to know where a shutoff valve is, or maybe they're doing a project and they just want some quick information and they could say, oh, red, don't touch that one. That's going to be electrical. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts? Oh, there's a comment here in the chat. So ChatGPT is undoubtedly a valuable tool. However, when it comes to utility plans, maintaining confidentiality is crucial, and such information should not be freely accessible to everyone. So yeah, I think this is about data security. On the
Absolutely.
other hand, integrating machine learning into your company's operations would be wise investment, potentially saving significant time and resources. Yeah, so I think what that's getting at, and thanks, it looks like that's a comment from Khalil, is a great comment on like the balance between security versus operations improvement from artificial intelligence. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Khalil is correct on that. Yeah. The point I was may not have come across is that, people are, when they hear artificial intelligence, they are thinking about these large language models. And, my point being, these are not something that will be used in the utility industry, to be honest. They are never going to be up to date enough. But, the use of machine learning within, trying to make sense of all the data that's coming in. I mean, you can get data in from locators, GPR systems, as-built, everything else like this. Conglomerating all that and getting some insight from that is perfect use for machine learning.
Yep.
Retrieving the data, maybe not so much, but making sense of the data, certainly.
Awesome. And then we have another comment. I think Holger, hopefully I'm saying your name right. But just commenting on the standard conversation earlier that they're working to centralize all the data in a national underground asset register, following other countries in Europe, like the Netherlands and Belgium. So yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely happening. We have partners in Europe where we've had similar discussions about that. The only caveat being this is where we think underground infrastructure is. Oftentimes you can public source a lot of information. You can get access to the records that they do have, but validating that information has never been more important, especially with growing populations and growing conflicts with cities and infrastructure. So yeah, I mean, exactly right. We're very aware and trying to not play catch up, but bring another level of validation to the conversation around underground registries and public access. And to Khalil's point earlier, there is a fine balance between letting let's say third party or dangerous actors to know where critical infrastructure is. There's also ways that you can administer that just to people that need access to it. So it's never been a proposal to say, hey, let the whole world know where everything is. It's just if you need to, if you're going to be digging, if there's been that handoff and that contract or that commitment to one another. So fine balance with both, absolutely.
All right. So we're getting towards the end of the conversation here. Any last thoughts you'd like to share on digitizing underground utilities, the industry, anything else?
It takes everyone involved on the call. I feel whether you're just an interested stakeholder or a participating party, we have many industry connections, and it's not just with the hardware side or the utility side or the construction side. We really do try to be a resource for people. So not only us, but it takes every person involved. So again, Erin, I think you're doing great work. Thank you for bringing us on and helping spread the message as well. I think this is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
As much as you can participate in the conversation, highlight the issue to other people, and then come up with solutions. Talking about problems are great, but coming up with solutions often are better for everyone. So that's my mantra.
The cheesy response is there's no better time than the present, right? Ended up in this situation because the answer was, oh, we'll do it later. We'll do it later. We'll deal with it later. We don't want to deal with anything right now until you're millions down the drain, you're months into a project, and continuous conflicts are occurring. And so no matter where you're at, there's no better time to start collecting accurate data than frankly right now. We've worked with people across the industries who've started implementing stuff halfway through projects. Just one thing happens and
yeah,
exactly, and they go, all right, today's the day. If they would have started at the beginning of the project, we could have saved how much time. But it's never a better time to start than right now.
Love it. Couldn't agree more. Peter, any last thoughts?
Well, I think, last thought, and kind of echoing what both Nick and Lilly have said, is that we need to really take a deeper look at how we disseminate this information and how we again, make sure the right people have it at the right time, but also to look at, the costs. Yes, there is the cost of a strike. There is cost, unfortunately, of, injuries or worse on a site. We always talk to construction companies about this as well. Say, okay, what would be the cost to your reputation if you're on the landing page of the New York Post because you hit a Verizon line, right? So
Right.
there are a lot of costs involved there, but they may not be apparent. Everybody looks at the cost of collecting the data. Yeah, it's a very small amount compared to what could happen. So it's a risk profile, and we need to actually look at that.
Absolutely. So I think I've definitely had a few ideas sparked from this conversation and learned a little bit more too. And I appreciate so much more about what goes into turning the lights on, getting my stove working, all these things that we kind of just take for granted. So there's a ton of stuff that goes into it. The data is absolutely essential to keep it running, not just keep it running, but make it better, make it more accessible, and improve our lives ultimately in the end. So really appreciate having all of you on. So thank you, Nick. Thank you, Lilly. Thank you, Peter. So virtual round of applause. And with that, I don't believe we have any more questions. So yeah, with that, we'll close the session for today. And thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Erin,
so much
thank you
for
for
having
having
us.
us. And yeah, thanks participants. Talk to you guys.
All right.
Right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.